I do not think we need to revoke it. India has, by its actions of August last year, effectively revoked it, and the LOC flows from the Simla Agreement. So the LOC also no longer exists in practice, but legally speaking, this is an agreement which has been registered with the United Nations, and Pakistan has a unblemished record in abiding by United Nations resolutions with respect to Kashmir and on other issues also. So it is not necessary for Pakistan to complement the Indian action, because then that will allow India to say that Pakistan has condemned the Simla Agreement and we can't have any dialogue. It is because of Pakistan. Right now, it is clear that the possibility of dialogue has been eliminated by India because of its de facto revocation of the Simla Agreement by its actions of August last year. We do not need to share this blame with India, so that's not necessary for us, but we do need to recognize what the situation is and make that clear to the international community. Well, number one, the demand is perfectly legitimate because, I mean, a major human rights situation has always existed in occupied Kashmir. And since the coronavirus virus has emerged, we know that the human rights situation in Kashmir has even further deteriorated as a result of a number of things. Number one, the Indian attitude towards all Muslims, including the Muslim majority of Kashmir, is that they are a problem, they are a challenge, they are not to be trusted, they are enemies, they're interested in the territory, not in the people, and that is being made absolutely clear by the ruling government, the ruling party, the ruling ideology. There are many liberal and fine Indians who do not subscribe to this ideology, but they have not been able to win elections. They are out of power. They have very little influence on Indian policy making under the current BJP RSS dominated government, and particularly under Prime Minister Modi. So they may, a corridor makes a lot of sense. However, India will refuse it, has refused it, and it will claim that it is making assistance available to occupied Kashmir like it does to the rest of India, even though that is not a truthful statement. And the big powers in the West have no intention of compelling India to do anything against its will. They may lean on it, they may use moral suasion, they may ask them to do all kinds of things and all privately, but they will publicly not put any pressure on India, and India looks upon such corridors as violating its own stand that Kashmir is its own territory, that it is treating them just like it treats its own citizens, which may be an outright lie, but that's the position they will stick to, and the international community will not push them beyond a certain extent, other than verbally, privately urging them to take account of the situation there. As I have mentioned in my talk, that we should step up our diplomacy. We have done it, and we have done a really competent job, and we have also succeeded to a great extent in directing international attention towards the situation in Kashmir, both after August the 5th last year and after the COVID-19 pandemic, and that we should continue and even accelerate and escalate our diplomatic efforts. And as I said, our diplomacy has been competent, but it is futile. Why is it essentially futile? It is futile because the United States and the other Western powers, while sympathetic and privately urging India to do a number of things to alleviate the situation, are absolutely determined not to press India on the subject beyond a certain point on behalf of Pakistan. And we saw the proof of that during the Pulwama Balakot issue, when they knew what the truth was, but they bought into the Indian narrative rather than the Pakistan narrative because of strategic reasons, and they will continue to do that. So diplomacy, yes, but our diplomacy has now got to become part of a two-track approach. One, diplomacy. Two, making clear through our diplomacy and through our actions at home and vis-a-vis India, taking risky initiatives towards India on behalf of peace, even though our people might even need to be informed why is this happening. But at the same time, the second track will have to be that if India continues to progress towards genocidal policies in occupied Kashmir, and there have been genocide alerts, and the text of the Genocide Convention shows that India is well advanced, on many of the 10 points which define genocide, then Pakistan in that situation cannot sit idly by, because that will have its impact on public opinion in Pakistan, on the situation on Azad Kashmir, and Pakistan would respond to an existential threat to itself and let the world then know how serious we are, and we will need to take the necessary security and other measures to let the world know that we are absolutely serious when we say this will not be countenanced, although we are going out of our way, taking risks on behalf of a peaceful engagement with India on all the other issues, including and primarily the Jammu and Kashmir issue. So we are peaceful, we're taking steps, we're taking risks, but if India dismisses all such attempts with contempt and continues on its genocidal path, Pakistan will stand in its path, because if it does not, Pakistan will not be able to exist as a credible country. Well, I can give you one instance and all. Pakistan, and our Prime Minister has already said that if India takes one step, Pakistan will take two steps. Pakistan has, also made its peaceful intentions clear through the Kartarpur initiative, etc. Pakistan has called for dialogue, all of these things. India has refused all of this. Now, in this situation, we have downgraded our diplomatic relations with India after August the 5th, but I believe that consistent with the Prime Minister's peaceful initiative towards India, despite all the difficulties, we should step them up, explaining that we are going out of our way, and this could include, it needs to be discussed, an initiative, an expression of a willingness that we are willing to take any steps, including visiting India, in order to meet with them at the highest level to try and take all the steps in unison to avoid the collapse of peace, to jointly and regionally address the challenges that confront us, primarily climate change, but right now also COVID-19. COVID-19 is a terrible challenge, but it is temporary. COVID-19 is, climate change is a far, far, far greater challenge than COVID-19, because we only have a few years within which to prevent it from becoming irreversible. Once it becomes irreversible, there will be global warming, in which every year will be warmer than the other, until within a generation the world will become intolerable for organized human existence. These are scientific conclusions based on a scientific consensus. So we are willing to join, we're willing to be peaceful. The Prime Minister is willing to face opposition. He should consult the opposition. He should consult everybody, but make it clear that he's willing to take these initiatives on behalf of peace. If India refuses, as it is most likely, then the second track of our diplomacy, which is we will not tolerate an Indian genocide against the Kashmiri Muslims, whom we regard as very close to. They are part of a disputed territory. The Muslims of India are also dear to us, but we recognize they are Indian Muslims. The Kashmiri majority community, which is Muslim, is not Indian. They are part of a disputed territory. We are prepared to be patient over finding some sort of acceptable solution, which is also acceptable to Kashmiri opinion and consistent with UN resolutions, but we're willing to be patient. But if India proceeds towards an irreversible creation of a fact of genocide so that you wipe these people out and the world stands by making sort of ineffective criticisms but actually doing nothing, then Pakistan, in order to preserve its own existence, cannot afford to stand idly by, no matter what the consequences. That has to be our position. Well, essentially, I believe I've sort of spelt out. Now, of course, we can go into much greater detail as to what do we mean by the second track, which means that while we seek peace, we will not tolerate genocide. We need to activate our Kashmiri brethren on both sides of the LOC. As you know, there are major parties in in occupied Kashmir, very much apart from the Hurriyat conference, which has been at the forefront of the freedom struggle in occupied Kashmir. But after August the 5th, there have been other parties, as you know, including the PDP, and other parties that were very pro-India before, but have since then realized and come on record. And India is still trying to negotiate some kind of agreement with them, but they are scared of doing it because whatever little support they have left amongst the valley will disappear if they compromise with India, especially after August the 5th. So Pakistan needs to look at a whole range of possible actions. I have spelled them out in my articles. There could be all kinds of things. I don't want to make statements which other people might have different ideas on, but how to make the Kashmiri voice heard abroad. The Kashmiri voice, not just the Azad Kashmiri voice, but the total Kashmiri voice, including should Azad Kashmir represent in our eyes the whole of the Kashmiri people who are under threat of genocide by India, or should there be a Kashmiri government in exile? Should our diplomats now go and press not only a one-track policy that restrain India, human rights of India, but also emphasize two other things. As I mentioned, we are taking initiatives despite India's totally negative position and at the risk of alienating many segments of our own opinion. But if India ignores that and you continue to adopt a permissive attitude towards India's genocidal policies, then Pakistan, for its own survival, its own existence, will be compelled to take a stand. And Pakistan, of course, I'm not spelling it out, but the world would understand it immediately, is a nuclear country. Anyone who threatens Pakistan's existence directly or indirectly will sooner or later come up against the deterrent capability of Pakistan. I can tell you, well, what we need to do is to make clear what our policy is. Right now, there's a degree of confusion. What is the extent of our commitment to our Kashmiri brethren across the LOC who are facing the prospect of LOC? Is it just diplomatic, or is it something more effective than that, and which will act as a deterrent to India? And that is what I've suggested in my presentation, that diplomacy is fine. It has to be accelerated. It has to include communicating what our overall strategy is. But on the ground, there is a perception that Pakistan's record shows that when the going gets tough, Pakistan doesn't quite do what it says. And we have a very unfortunate record after all, in 1971, we lost the majority of our population without a fight, and that record still hangs over us. And India is arguing to itself and to the world, Pakistan can do nothing. Its economy is in shambles. Its politics is completely shattered. It's under pressure of FATF. It cannot do anything, even if the situation were better. It couldn't do much. We saw it 71. Now its situation is so bad that we can anything and get away with it. And the strategic alliance between India and the Western powers will be strong enough to say to Pakistan, as I mentioned, Baskar, get on with India. Don't make a nuisance of yourself. Don't escalate the situation. We are working with India. We're trying to persuade them. koi genocide nahi ho raha hai wahan, flana, 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 all of that. Whereas in fact, what is happening, the people in Kashmir have made it clear they will not surrender to India. They will not lay their arms, but they are few compared to the massive forces of India. 900,000 alone in Azad Kashmir, knocking down its people, 7 million in the valley itself, the most densely guarded soldier to population, and this is not their own population. This is a foreign occupation. This is a foreign and a military and paramilitary force that regards the local people as enemies, as dangers to India's security. They don't have any mercy towards them. Their black laws are in operation. So under those black laws, no crime committed against the people of Kashmir is punishable in India, and that the record proves it. There have been sort of these phony cases. No Indian officer has been convicted. There's total impunity there. Under these circumstances, the possibility of escalation to genocide is inherent in the situation. What will Pakistan do? So far, there's a question mark. That question mark needs to be removed. And Pakistan wants peace, but will not shy away from preventing genocide. That is the clear message. When that message is heard loud and clear and is seen to be credible, you will see the response of the international community. They will know that there's no option but to tell India, take it easy, start a dialogue, reach some sort of compromise that's acceptable to the people concerned, and combine to sort of strengthen world peace and fight other pandemics and the climate crisis, etc. For this, Pakistan's strategic cooperation with China is absolutely essential, even though China operates on a much broader canvas. And as I said, China has certain reservations with regard to Kashmir. Keep them in mind. But Pakistan also has its own national obligations. You shy away from that, you lose all credibility as a people. Because we've done that in the past. It's not something that we haven't done. We've done that in the past and all. There's been, as you know, what happened in Dhaka. There's been Kargil. There's been Aptabad. We don't have a very good record. We have to correct that perception. And then internally, our governance has to be fair, has to be seen to be fair by all parts of Pakistan. And you know what I'm referring to. No, I don't believe. Everything I've been saying suggests that it's not a lost cause. It's a very difficult cause, and ultimately, the solution is going to have to be a compromise solution. But it has to be what is known as a principled compromise. A compromise that does not betray commitments, does not betray the interests of those people whom you've been supporting, and does not betray the interests of Pakistan, both security-wise, political-wise, economic-wise, etc. So yes, the Secretary General has called for a worldwide ceasefire and for peaceful settlement of disputes. But when it comes to Kashmir, the traditional position of the UN Secretary General and indeed of the UN Secretary, it has been that according to the charter, the resolutions adopted were under Article 6, which are legal but which are not enforceable. And therefore, the UN Secretary General can't do very much. The UN Secretary General can do a lot. If you look at Article 99, if he perceives a threat to peace in any part of the world, he can convey that concern to the UN Security Council and ask for a meeting of the UN Security Council to address the situation which is causing concern in his view to regional or global peace. And Kashmir has always qualified, and more so today, qualifies as such a situation. So we must support the UN Secretary General in his statement, and we must ask him to act upon it and to come up with. But at the same time, this diplomacy can only go so far, and we need to explore every avenue, every legal avenue. Go once, go twice, repeatedly. You can go to the, the World Court. You can go to the UN Security Council, the Human Rights Commission, etc. Even if you don't receive satisfaction immediately, those efforts have to be continued and stepped up. but they will not be sufficient, because India is a great power, a great market, and it has allies in the West who will not press it beyond a certain point, even if it starts committing outright and evident genocide. They will do nothing. They will merely sort of, as I said, express themselves. This is where Pakistan needs to come in. What are our assets? Our assets are that we have a principled stand, we are a nuclear power, and we tie our own existence to India not following a policy of extermination in Kashmir, and negotiating sincerely for a settlement of outstanding issues, even if that takes time and ultimately requires a compromise settlement which is acceptable to the people concerned, primarily the people of Kashmir, and that compromise settlement can then be put in a new set of UN Security Council resolutions on a consensus basis, which would then supersede existing UN resolutions, because peace would have been achieved, a settlement would have been achieved, the rights of the Kashmiris would have been guaranteed and secured, and India-Pakistan relations will be able to enter into a new phase of cooperation, etc. So in order to get peace and cooperation, you have to be principled, and you have to be firm, and you have to take risks. If you follow a risk-free policy, you cannot follow a principled policy. This has been the tragedy of Pakistan, as a result of which, within the first 25 years, Jinnah's Pakistan, Quaid-e-Azam's Pakistan, Allama Iqbal's dream was buried. Well, number one, I'm not a medical specialist, so I should sort of qualify my remarks with this statement. Number two, COVID-19 is the immediate concern of the entire world. It may hopefully be a relatively temporary, although we don't know. A vaccine has not been discovered yet. They said within a year or 18 months they hope to find a vaccine. In fact, the record shows that no coronavirus has had a successful vaccine. Sometimes the virus has evolved into less harmful kinds, or there have been therapeutical sort of remedies which, without a vaccine, have controlled. The flu used to be a lethal pandemic, in the past. Today, the flu can still kill old and weak people, but generally speaking, it is not considered lethal. So is this pandemic ever going to have a vaccine? It is quite possible that no vaccine will be discovered. Therefore, there are certain other rules which WHO comes out with every day which need to be followed. Does that impact on warlike situations? Of course, because war, if it breaks out, means that all the guidelines of the WHO with regard to the coronavirus will be violated immediately. So therefore, the number one concentration has to be not only combating the coronavirus, and apart from finding vaccines, which is essential but may not be possible for a very long time to come, if at all, but then cooperating within the country and with neighbors in finding therapeutical solutions which can reduce the dangers which we are faced with, which are growing day by day. We know there will be second waves, there will be third waves, and the Spanish flu, the second wave was 10 times worse than the first wave. So Allah na kare, in this coming winter, we are being told that the coronavirus is going to combine with the flu virus, and it could even be worse, and particularly under some very stupid governments like the world's mightiest power, the United States, which is utterly and totally confused about what its policy is with regard to lockdown. This could really exacerbate the situation. There's a degree of confusion in Pakistan also. So yes, we need to cooperate with all our neighbors, including India, with regard to this coronavirus. But if India uses the coronavirus as a curtain, an iron curtain, for perpetrating a policy of progressive genocide against the people in Kashmir, then of course we will be confronted with a difficult situation. So our diplomacy has to be active. Kashmiri diplomacy has to be active and concerted, and it has to be up to date, and we have to have innovative matters, but we must always speak the truth based on the facts, that nobody accuses us of saying that you are not giving us the factual position. You're exaggerating, distorting the situation. Then we would lose credibility. Is India on the path towards some kind of genocide in Kashmir? Well, ask Genocide Watch, read the Genocide Convention and read other statements, where the Kashmiris themselves said, because genocide is not just killings, it is disintegrating the identity of a group for political, social, or any other reason. That comes within the definition of genocide, which means breaking up and making, making a people who act as a unit disappear from the scene. That is genocide. That is happening as we speak. And so we have to concentrate primarily on COVID-19, never losing sight of the fact that India is using COVID-19 to reinforce its policies since August the 5th of last year in Kashmir, and that Pakistan is willing to cooperate, search for peace, but never countenance policies of genocide in Kashmir, whichever side of the LOC, because they are essentially one people, and they are people who have the closest of ties with Pakistan. We do not say Azad Kashmir is Pakistan. It is Pakistan administered Kashmir, and we are sensible of their rights and their aspirations. Similarly, across the LOC is Indian administered Kashmir, but India says no, it's part of India, and the majority of those people are Muslims and therefore can never be equal citizens, and if they resist, you treat them as enemies of the country. So that's a totally different situation. It is a very, very difficult situation. Pakistan is a developing country with limited resources, but the last thing it can afford to do is an unprincipled walking away from its fundamental obligations. After all, Pakistan came into being as a result of an ideology which it has never lived up to, and if you continue in this fashion, you won't have Pakistan around for much longer. You know what you did within the first 25 years. Learn from that and make sure that Pakistan exists as a fair country under good governance in which it seeks peace but will not refrain from its essential defense, including those of people who are essentially part of its concern. After all, Pakistan came into being as a result of its Muslim identity. Hence, the Kashmiri people are deeply related to us. If we can have a peaceful relationship with India based on fairness, we would be willing to accept. Of course, we have that the Indian Muslims are part of India. They need to be treated properly, which they are not. But the Kashmiri Muslims have to decide their own future according to international law, and we need to find some kind of compromise settlement if India refuses to implement the UN resolutions, which are the legal solution to it. But at least if we find some kind of compromise which is acceptable to the Kashmiri people, preserves their rights and identity, and we can then build upon that to have a peaceful subcontinent, that's fine, even if it's less than 100% satisfactory solution.